Right. Thank you, everybody, for attending NOFA New Jersey's monthly organic open house. Today is Wednesday, March 30th, and we are joined by the wonderful Dave Kimmell and Cindy Roberts of the State Agricultural Development Committee. And they're here to present all of their awesome resources. And afterwards, we'll have an informal discussion about whatever the community wants to talk about. So, Dave, I know you have some screen sharing to do. If you want to go ahead and start, the floor is yours.
Devin. Yep, Cindy and I will go do a quick overview of the State Agriculture Development Committee and its programs and resources. And now I think you can see the screen. Good?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. So just to get right into it, Cindy and I work at the State Ag Development Committee, or the SADC, and that is what is it? It's a state agency, and it coordinates all of these programs: farmland preservation, right to farm, agriculture mediation, FarmLink. And then there's a couple of post-preservation cost share grant opportunities for preserved farms. And it's a state agency, and it was created in 1983 when two acts of legislation were passed: the Agriculture Retention and Development Act, which is essentially the Farmland Preservation Statute, and the Right to Farm Act. And that created the State Ag Development Committee and the framework for the farmland preservation and the Right to Farm programs. It was all about ag retention, preserving a permanent land base, so that's farmland preservation, and ag development, supporting the viability of the agriculture industry and supporting a positive agricultural business climate. And it's like we're housed in the same office building as the New Jersey Department of Agriculture, so we always work closely with them. And the Secretary of Agriculture is the chairperson of the State Ag Development Committee. The rest of the committee members, we meet they have a monthly meeting to do their business. We're the staff to the committee. The other members, Secretary of Ag is the chair, and then there's representatives from some state agencies: Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Community Affairs, Department of Treasury, and Rutgers. And then there's a couple of farmer members and a couple of public members, so representing all of these interests. I'm gonna go through the Right to Farm, Ag Mediation, FarmLink really quickly, and then we will give a good overview of farmland preservation. So this slide about the Right to Farm Act is the entire Right to Farm presentation that our attorneys and I've given in the past, that could take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, but I'll do it in 5 minutes. Or if you have questions later, we can chat about it. Like I said, the Right to Farm Act, established in 1983, every state has some type of Right to Farm Act to protect farmers from. In New Jersey, there's two types of protections: from nuisance complaints from neighbors, and overly restrictive local regulations from municipal ordinances, or maybe county ordinances primarily. So on a case-by-case basis, the act could be used to preempt a local ordinance if it's restricting a farm's operation and certain criteria are met. And then for complaints from neighbors, the act is powerful in that it says prior to somebody filing an action in court, like a suit, whether it's a neighbor or a town, they first have to file that complaint with the County Agriculture Development Board, like a local board that has a public hearing and review process, which then looks into it to determine officially whether a farm can get right to farm protection or not. And there's two formal processes by which a farm can receive right to farm protection and say they're protected by the Right to Farm Act. A farmer can't just say, I can do whatever I want, I have the right to farm. They could say that, but that would be wrong. There's only by an official action of the County Ag Development Board can farm officially get right to farm protection to be protected from a lawsuit or a local regulation. And one of those processes is when there's can be initiated by a farmer by a neighbor or a municipality. They can file a complaint. It's the complaint process. Alternatively, the farmer could initiate a process called requesting a site-specific ag management practice determination. And in both cases, the process is similar. There has to, usually there's some type of notification of nearby property owners, and the county ag development board has a public hearing. They gather information. Sometimes they do a site visit. They discuss it, deliberate, and pass a resolution with their findings of whether or not the farm is entitled to right to farm protection based on the eligibility criteria and what has been said, and their balancing of the interests. And then that's the final decision, unless it gets appealed. And then it could get appealed to the SADC, and a few more steps there. So potentially it could take a while, but it's a strong protection. It's significant protection because you could override a local ordinance or be shielded from a lawsuit. So there's significant eligibility criteria. And first one is that the farm would have to meet the Act's definition of commercial farm, which is, there's a couple different versions of that. It's either a farm management unit, like all the pieces that make up the farm that are operated together as a single enterprise. A farm management unit that is 5 acres or more and satisfies farmland assessment criteria and produces products worth at least $2,500 annually. Or if it's less than 5 acres, then it otherwise satisfies farmland assessment criteria, except for that size criteria, and produces products worth $50,000 or more annually. There's also a commercial farm definition just for beekeeping operations that doesn't have the same size criteria in there. In order for an activity to be eligible for protection, because somebody might be complaining about, the smell or the noise or the dust. What they're complaining about is whatever is causing that, or a farm might be seeking protection preemptively or, proactively, or when there is an issue for some activity, like their farm market operation or whatever general production practices they have. In order for it to be protected, the activity has to be included in the Act's list of protected activities. That's in Section 9 of the Right to Farm Act, and that goes through a lot of different activities: producing products, processing, the output of the farm, the operation of farm market in conformance with municipal standards, and replenishing soil, tilth, clearing woodlands, a lot of different things that are in there. And the eligibility, well, I skipped over a bunch of eligibility criteria. The first of which is that a farm has to be a commercial farm. The other ones are that it's in a location that either permits agriculture through the local zoning, or as of the last time, or as of a date in 1998 when the Act was amended, that agriculture was permitted at that time. It also has to be compliant with all applicable state and federal laws and regulations, does not pose a threat to public health and safety, and importantly, conforms to generally accepted agricultural management practices. So it's, acting responsibly. And there's certain AMPs, or ag management practice rules, that the SADC has established that help clarify the standards for what is a responsible or accepted practice. So there's ones for vegetable production, tree fruit, on-farm direct marketing, implementing a farm conservation plan. Those are just a few of the 12 or 13 of them. And just a few important things to remember. I mentioned that if anybody is aggrieved by the operation of a commercial farm, the Act requires them to first file a complaint with the local county ag development board prior to taking action in court. The County Ag Development Board has the primary jurisdiction to make determinations on eligibility. So if a town were to say, we don't think it's a commercial farm, we're just going to enforce our ordinances, that's going against the law. They first have to file that complaint with the County Ag Development Board, because the CADB, the County Ag Development Board, has the first jurisdiction on deciding whether or not this fits within the Right to Farm Act or not. And right to farm protection is not automatic. It's something that you can't just say you have it, and it's not automatic once you request it. There has to be a balancing of competing interests between the agricultural needs and public health and safety concerns. So it's not carte blanche for the board to say the farm can do it at once. You have to, there's a requirement for them to consider the input of the other side, and also the impact of local regulations, and when appropriate, defer to municipal regulations. The farm, if they want to seek preemption of a local ordinance, they have to show a legitimate farm-based, ag-based reason for not complying with the local regulations. Just an example might be a town has an ordinance that says fences throughout the town cannot be higher than 6 feet, but the farm says, well, for a deer fence to be effective, I need it to be 8 feet at least. So in that case, if they can't just work it out themselves and say, well, look, this is what the standard is, then they could seek that protection or preemption of that local ordinance to the Right to Farm Act. That's the very quick overview. We also have resources online. There's a guidebook for farmers, neighbors, and municipalities, as well as some fact sheets and other rules and the statute online on our website. And the agricultural mediation program is another thing that we use to help resolve conflicts. I mentioned the formal process through the Right to Farm Act can take time and money away from the farm. So this is a more informal way to resolve conflicts, including farmer-neighbor, farmer-municipality, right to farm conflicts, as well as some other ones. Just overall, it's a free service that we offer, and we have trained and impartial mediators, or the facilitators, once everybody agrees to participate, and they help them discuss their points of view and their interests and see where their interests line up to help them either resolve things or narrow issues and try to find solutions. And like I said, we encourage the use of mediation as an alternative to using the formal right to farm process if possible, because it's easy, it's confidential. There's no obligation to compromise or to come up with an agreement, but hopefully that is the result, or it helps narrow the issues and it can help maintain relationships and so forth. And so we definitely use the mediation program a lot for farmer neighbor and farmer municipality issues. It's also set up with, we get a cost share grant from USDA to help administer the program. And we're the mediation service provider for any time there's an issue between farmers and USDA agencies also, and farmers and any type of lender or creditor. So if there's ever any issues, USDA denies a loan application or says you're not following conservation program requirement, they're required by law to offer various appeal rights, including mediation, and that's where we can step in free service. The 2018 Farm Bill also expanded the use of the grant and the program, so we can also use it for pretty much anything, including lease issues with related to land or equipment, livestock, storage facilities, buildings, energy facilities, anything, and any type of farm transition or farm succession issue between related or unrelated parties. And if there's an important issue that is not in our list of cases that we can mediate, the Secretary of Agriculture can identify them and say, yes, you can mediate this. So there's flexibility to add more things. So it's a great free service, and we encourage everybody to use it if it could help. Now also the FarmLink program. there's a couple aspects of it. Essentially, it's overall kind of like a resource and referral center for new farmers, established farmers that are new farmers seeking access to land or help getting started, and established farmers looking to expand, farm owners seeking farmers for their land or who have farming opportunities available, and farmers that are starting farm transition or farm succession plans. So we have a bunch of resource pages on our website that cover all of those types of things. And then historically, we've had an online linking service that can help connect farm owners that have land or farming opportunities available with farm seekers, new and established farmers that are looking for access to land or an opportunity on a farm. And in 2015 or so, we, along with NOFA New Jersey, partnered on a new version of this online linking service through a beginning farmer grant from USDA. That was one of the outcomes of that grant that we worked together on to create a more user-friendly and streamlined online linking tool, and that's NJ LandLink. So if you haven't been to that website, I encourage you to check it out, njlandlink.org. It's just a screenshot of one point in time a while ago. All of these green markers on the map represent different postings or listings that farm owners have put on the website, and then people can go to the website, click on the listing, read more about it, and if they're registered, contact the other parties directly to see if they can have some type of arrangement that could be made. And so farm for sale, for lease, partnership opportunity, employment, anything. And farm owners can put up their postings, farm seekers can put up their postings, and you can filter and sort and do lots of things on the website. For anybody that registers, we try to follow up with them and help direct them to resources. We have a basic resources page on the website, plus all of the resource pages that are on the SADC's FarmLink section, including beginning farmers. So often we'll get calls from and emails from people looking to get started in farming, as well as when we reach out to LandLink participants, and we'll refer them to a lot of things on this page, as well as other helpful resources. Many times we'll suggest the Exploring the Small Farm Dream course that NOFA New Jersey offers every year, and or workshops and conferences. So the FarmLink is all about opportunities, which we direct people to the LandLink website, and resources for beginning farmers, for finding land, finding farmers, farm transition. Another example of a resource, we have a farmland leasing guidebook. This was another product of that beginning farmer grant that we worked on with NOFA New Jersey. So a guide for landowners and farmers. Yeah, people have questions about what to consider when they're considering leasing. And for farmland preservation, I'm going to turn it back over to Cindy to.
All righty. I'm going to have to share my screen. And I'm going to start with a overview document that we put together in order to have a kind of user-friendly brochure that we could send to landowners and assist our partners in communicating with landowners about our program. So John had asked at the start of this, what does it mean to preserve your farm? And preserving a farm is accomplished when
Cindy?
Yep.
Yeah. Right now I'm seeing your desktop.
Oh, oops, hold on. Let me kill that then. I gotta stop sharing. Here we go. Better?
Yep.
You now see the farmland preservation overview?
Yes.
All right, cool. So preserving alarm is accomplished when the landowner is compensated for recording a farmland preservation development easement, referred to as the deed of easement. And the deed of easement restricts the amount of future non-agricultural activity while also supporting the continuation and expansion of the agricultural operation. So that goes back to what Dave described as our dual mission. One is to preserve the land, but the other is also to promote the industry and the continued agricultural use of the property. Again, supporting the agricultural development component of our mission. A lot of landowners use our program not only to create the peace of mind that their property that they've stewarded for however many years will remain a farm forever. It also provides capital for either investing in the business, retirement. A lot of farmers or landowners refer to their land as their retirement plan. And preserving your property by selling the development easement is one way to receive an influx of capital, but also to be able to continue your business on into retirement, or to be able to pass your property down to heirs at a later date, sell your property. So you're breaking up, accessing your equity into two different portions. A lot of landowners, farmers in particular, are carrying a lot of debt. So at times, the purchase price is provided to the lender to either reduce or eliminate, pay off the mortgage. And we do have quite a few landowners that use the purchase through a like-kind exchange where they can save taxes on the sale of the easement, or outside of the like-kind exchange just to buy more land so that they can expand their agricultural operation. Quite a few of those landowners actually will buy unpreserved land in areas that qualify for our program, and at times turn around and apply to preserve that next farm, continuing the ability to access some of the equity and use those funds for any of these reasons that I just discussed. An important thing in the farmland preservation program is to remember that the land remains private. It's not like selling to Green Acres where the public has access. A landowner can allow the public on their property, just like you or I can invite someone to our home, but the property is private. Hold on. So Dave talked a little bit about what the SADC is. I'm going to take it in the direction of acquisition. We have 4 programs that our funding is split into. One is called the Direct Easement Program, where landowners can apply directly to the SADC. We target the largest, best soils, farms or properties out there, and it's 100% funded by the SADC. We also have a planning incentive grant program where counties and municipalities can apply as a planning incentive grant recipient. They have to have a farmland preservation plan and a dedicated source of funding, because if it comes in through either of those programs, the SADC provides a cost share, but the rest of the funding is cobbled together, usually with both county and municipal funds. And in those programs, the county holds the easement, right? When a landowner sells and we go to closing and the deed of easement is signed, it is a grant from the landowner to an agency. In the direct easement, it's the SADC. In the planning incentive grant programs, it's usually the county. A township can't hold an easement in our program. If the county's not providing a cost share in the municipal program, the town can ask the SADC to hold the easement. And in the nonprofit program, nonprofits can apply for 50% funding. They typically match the additional 50% that they have to bring to the acquisition, either by going to the county and the town if they've are processing a farm that has been targeted by them, or they often use a federal program for funding called the Agricultural Land Easement, which also provides a 50%. So they can come up with 100% of their funding. Dave already talked to you about some of the post-preservation programs that we work with. So what's really important to most farmers is, well, how much money are you going to give me, right? Land doesn't get preserved unless the numbers work. So in our program, whoever submitted the application, whichever program it comes through, would hire 2 independent appraisers to estimate the value, the current value of the property. Things that they look at is local zoning, state regulations, wetlands, soils, septic suitability, how developable is the property. And they determine 2 values. One is the before value. What would that farm sell in a fee simple to a developer or or a landowner that just wants to own a farm? But they also look at the after value. What is that farm valued worth as a deed restricted farm? And the development easement, the value we pay, is the difference between the two. Because remember, the landowner is still going to own the farm, so they still retain that after value. And the only difference is they can't sell it in its before anymore, because there's going to be a permanent deed of easement that's recorded with the vesting deed. So anytime a title commitment comes up, the landowner's going to know that they're looking at a deed restricted property. An important thing to remember, I encourage, this is the best part of my entire job, is encourage landowners to apply, because there's no cost. The agency or whoever, or the nonprofit, pays the costs moving the deal forward. And there's no obligation. If the number doesn't work, if the family can't come together and agree on accepting, we just shake hands and we say, hey, think about our program in the future. So here's an example, or 2 examples. If the before value, the unpreserved value, was estimated at 20,000 per acre, and the per acre preserved after value was 5,000 an acre, then a landowner would be offered 15,000. And we can't really over the phone, well, we can't ever over the phone tell a landowner prior to applying where their easement value is going to come in, because you see these are very different values here, because it really all depends on where in the state you are. Other really important factors for value are the amount of road frontage you have, where your wetlands are located, those kind of issues. So offers can be made to landowners in a pretty quick turnaround, usually give or take 6 months. And so you're really only tying up your property and your options for that period of time until you get an offer. It's really important when you're considering applying for preservation is that you really do a lot of planning ahead. We strongly recommend, like in the direct easement program, it would be one of our regional acquisition coordinators. The counties and the towns all have coordinators in the nonprofit. To have someone come out to the farm and walk it with you and just start talking about what your goals are, what you see into the future. Do you have a succession plan for the land? Are there heirs? So that, are there any pre-existing non-agricultural uses? Some of the really popular ones are milling operations, a non-ag use in one of your buildings, a mechanic shop. It's fine if you have a shop where you fix your own equipment, but as soon as you start taking equipment from neighbors, that's a non-agricultural use. It's a commercial use. So we can build flexibility into the application, and it's just way easier to have those conversations on site. I've had landowners tell me, no, there's no pre-existing non-ag use, and the minute we're walking around the property, I'm like, oh yeah, there's one. You know, the son-in-law is a landscaper. He wants to dump his wood chips on the farm. Again, it doesn't affect the farm operation, but if they're not generated on the farm, then it's a pre-existing non-ag use. So just know that you'll get a lot of help with all the paperwork, and trying to nail down what is important to the current owners of the farm, particularly if you have kids that are farming. You want to take into consideration what's important to them. And if there are no heir apparents, then you want to think about what makes this farm most marketable. For instance, if there's no house on the property, right? You're selling all your non-agricultural development rights, but we have things called exception areas. They're areas that a landowner can identify as a spot for a future home on these vacant properties. Because an exception area is an area that's surveyed out, and the bio meets and bounds description on the survey, and the deed of easement won't cover that area. We strongly advise landowners to take an exception area around an existing house and agricultural buildings, because we hear over and over and over again, we need some off-farm income. But taking an exception area provides the ability to have some on-farm income that isn't directly related to the production of the property. And Dave discussed, or is going to discuss, some of the cost share grant programs. But before we flip over to that, I also want to talk about a little bit about tax benefits of preserving your property. We're not accountants. We can't give any type of legal advice or tax advice, but it is truly something to consider. When you sell just the easement of your property, you're only accessing some of the equity in your land. And then if you sell the land as a deed restricted property in a different year, you know, a basic understanding is you have a less of a tax hit on both of those years. But we also really encourage landowners, once they've made the decision to apply for farmland preservation, it's never too soon to start assembling a team of professionals that can advise you. Particularly if there's heirs where the property is going to be passed down. I think the family dynamics can get a little touchy. And so it's better to have that impartial professional that's there that can kind of mediate. It goes back to, you know, the mediation program, the family, to try to make sure everybody's goals and objectives are heard and talked about. And when you get an offer, right, the most important thing not to get so hung up on is the per acre price, the gross offer to you, but it's important to be able to nail down the net return. How much of that are you going to get to keep? And none of us that work in farmland preservation can tell you that, because it's very personal to your own, you know, income off farm, your own personal situations. And so, you know, the best thing you can do is talk to an accountant, particularly if you have a mortgage on the property. I really, you know, no landowner is like, wow, that's way more than I ever expected. There's always the, okay, that's the number we have to work with. But if you're paying down a mortgage, part of the consideration should be, right, not just the money you're getting, but how much are you saving by not having to pay the interest on that mortgage? I've had landowners that were on the fence of rejecting. Once I had that conversation with them and they went back to their accountant, they turned around and accepted, because that's a big consideration, right? If you can pay off a mortgage that you have another 10, 20 years to pay, with the easement money, and then you don't have that debt. This is the acquisition team. I'm going to put in a shameless plug for applications. If anybody on this line owns land that is not preserved, we'd love, give me a call. I'd love to talk to you about the program and see if it could be a good fit. And if you know anybody near your farm, it's very creative if you have a preserve farm for landowners to try to protect their flanks. Right to farm conflicts often occur when residential or non-farm activities abut your farm. So the more that you can protect your flanks with other deed restricted farms, the easier it is to expand your operation and not to have right to farm complaints. So give us a call. I think while I'm here, you guys can see the website now. I wanted to also, Dave took you there, but if you want to see any of our guidance documents that are on here, you just have to work your way through the tabs on the left-hand side. And then back on the home page, down here is a contact list for all SADC staff. You can get to our guidance library and take a look at upcoming soil protection standards. It's a really neat website that tries to provide as much information as we can. So take a look at it. And with that, I'm done, Dave.
Okay. Yeah, just to add on to what Cindy was saying, after a farm is preserved, there's various benefits to preservation. And once a farm is preserved, there's also a couple opportunities for cost share grants to do a couple things for farmland stewardship and conservation. One is soil and water conservation cost share grants that can help improve soil and water aspects of the farm and the natural resources. Some of them are the same kind of things that we get a cost share grant from USDA and RCS through, for instance, EQIP program with grass waterways and things like that, but also things that those programs don't cover, more production related practices like irrigation systems and drainage and irrigation pumps. So those are the more common ones that people will seek a cost share grant for their preserve farm through the Soil and Water Conservation Cost Share Grant program. And then also deer fencing grants. There's a cost share grant opportunity for preserved farm owner operators that can help pay for installing deer fencing on a preserved farm to protect, crops from deer damage. I think not something similar, but not preservation related as an FYI, the legislation was also passed in January that is directing the Department of Agriculture to create a similar deer fencing program for non-preserved farms. And so that's something that they're working on that at the earliest could get initiated in July when they get funding, but they also have to write regulations for it. So that's just an FYI. And that's a quick overview of all the main SADC programs and resources.
Thank you both so much for all this information. I don't want to embellish this, but I think SADC is one of the unsung heroes of farming and just farmland preservation, obviously, throughout the state. I mean, so much of what you do allows farmers to do what they do. Do you find awareness to SADC programs or raising awareness a challenge? How do you find the general public's ease of accessibility?
So
Makes sense.
I'll jump in on an acquisition standpoint, right? Pre-preservation. I think the farm community knows about us well because of discussions at the Board of Ag, county agriculture development boards, municipalities that are planning incentive grant towns have an agriculture advisory committee, that's split between government and farmer members. So I think we have good exposure there. However, so much of New Jersey's farmland is not owned by farmers. And that's the group that we have to continue to step up our game and try to figure out how to reach them, educate them about, the program, and try to make them realize, like, even I was talking to a developer yesterday, and I think the property we're interested in is not zoned the way that everything I see on their website shows what their specialty is for building on. So I crafted together an email. I did a cold call, emailed, and they were like, well, give us your best pitch. Send us an email. Tell us, what's up. And I'm like, you guys can't build on this. It's 6-acre lots. That's not what you do. And, you could use our payment in order to fund the 2 other properties you own in this town that are zoned for the type of development you do. And we'll just see where it goes.
A lot of creative solutions.
Yeah.
I don't want to grandstand the mic here. I have 2 quick questions. Number one, you mentioned the Farm Bill, and the Farm Bill is of high interest lately as a lot of folks are planning their input. Do you have any Farm Bill priorities going forward? And then second, can you just briefly touch upon how you interface with the state board and other organizations? Because a lot of folks within farming are overwhelmed by the amount of different organizations offering different resources. If you could just touch on that, that'd be awesome.
There's definitely a lot of organizations in New Jersey, and I think the best overview I saw ever of all that was at a Rutgers beginning farmer training when Just Niederer had a single slide that had a lot of words and arrows on it. There's the State Ag Development Committee and the Department of Agriculture, and then State Board of Agriculture, County Boards of Agriculture, County Ag Development Boards. I think essentially everything is kind of connected in one way or another, and there's often people that serve on more than one kind of boards. There's the state agencies, and then there's a State Board of Agriculture that is like the Secretary of Agriculture's who he or she reports to, and those people I think are appointed by the governor and the legislature, if I'm not mistaken. What am I trying to say? The State Board of Agriculture and then County Boards of Agriculture and Farm Bureau are more kind of policy and advocacy. Farmers talking among themselves about what are the important issues and directing from the State Board, like what the Department of Agriculture should be working on. And then on another track, the State Ag Development Committee and County Ag Development Boards are government entities that are coordinating some of these programs.
The only thing, Devin, I can offer on the Farm Bill is we're always interested in seeing ways to provide federal programs or get federal programs to be more user friendly, to shorten the time frame, to understand the process. And other than that, the changing of the Farm Bill every 4 years seems to always get us a little caught off guard, because trying to wade through what all those changes are and be able to put together guidance to the preserved farm community and upcoming landowners, it just takes so long. Like, we just finally got the Farm Bill 18 documents approved, and when you turn around, in like a year or two, we're going to have a new Farm Bill.
Can I ask a question, Devin?
The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm very curious about when a preserved farm is sold. Is it sold on the open market, or is it sold at auction? And if it's sold at auction, Is there any restriction as to who can bid and in the auction if a person wants to buy the farm as an estate rather than a working farm? Do they have equal opportunity for purchase that a working farmer would have?
Okay, I think I can address some of that, Dave, and then jump in if you have more. So when a farm is preserved, it can be sold in any means. The landowner still owns it. It's privately held, so they can work with a realtor. They can put a for sale by owner sign on their property, or sometimes when they want a quick sale, they could hire one of the auctioneers. Max Spann's group has done a lot of auctions for preserved farms. If it goes to auction, I believe whoever between the auctioneer and the landowner, they decide what type of minimum requirements there are, and usually it's set at a price, right? There's a minimum bid price set. So I've never participated in an auction, but I've heard talk in our office, people then get qualified to put in bids. They have to prove that they can come up with the minimum price. But to your question of, do farmers get priority treatment over a doctor or a lawyer? I'm pretty confident that answer is no. And the feeling being that typically anyone that buys a farm in order to maintain farmland assessment is going to rent the farm to a landowner. So just being preserved does not guarantee farmland assessment. You still have to apply every August, and you still have to meet that requirement.
Thank you. And my other question is about the land use. Once you have a farm, if you want to put up a big solar array and you want to have a dual use with either livestock grazing or actually growing crops under the array, would that be allowable?
It is not at this time. When landowners have existing solar on the property, we always advise one of those exception areas that we're talking about. We do have rules that allow solar on deed restricted farms. I'm not an expert, that's more just post-closing, but it's limited. The amount of power that can be generated is limited to 110% of what can be used on the farm. Right? The dual use, we're just not there yet. Our deed of easement and our entire program is based on preserving lands forever that has the ability to be used for a variety of agricultural uses. And so the minute these solar fields go on, I know that people are grazing animals underneath them, and we also have soil protection standards that are about to be adopted. So how does that all fit in? It's just, we're just not there yet. If we're ever going to get there.
Yeah.
I think it's limited by the terms of the deed of easement and also by legislation that, as Cindy pointed out, the 110%, I think, is from a statute that specifically said how much solar or renewable kind of energy could be installed on a preserved farm, as well as other types of farms. But the easement says the land has to be, easement says no non-agriculture uses are not permitted, and that the land has to be maintained for agricultural production.
Evan, can I ask a question? This is Callie. Good morning.
I'm not running the floor. It's open discussion. Anybody that wants to chime in, bring up a topic.
I'm always a big fan of Dave and Cindy. And in seeing Cindy recently, I believe this is a good conclusionary question to this wonderful session. Cindy, you had mentioned when we saw each other now your current outreach to further farms. Could you give us an update how that's going? And I know you had touched on, I think, 400 farms you're trying to reach out to now.
Right.
Yeah, so Go for it, Cindy.
All right, thanks, Kelly. And another shameless plug. So my position currently is the outreach and training coordinator for the SADC. We realized a while back that our partners need a lot of assistance, right? And some is just dealing with landowners and getting on the farm and being sure the application is done well. But the other is trying to get applications in. We have a lot of funding right now. And you know, it seems like we've been in business for almost 40 years. So what everybody calls that low hanging fruit, you know, the easy applications, they've been done. And so now we're dealing more with some non-farmer owned lands, some with crazy estate and title issues. And so they just take longer. So in an effort to try to get some of the bigger farms with better soils, our GIS group did a run using Conservation Blueprint. If you guys aren't used to that website, you should just check it out. It is an amazing online platform that you can identify a property, you can overlay block and lot, and then you can overlay all these other characteristics. You can see where preserved farmland is in proximity. You can see where the agricultural development area is that the county adopted, and you have to be in an ADA to be eligible for our program. So using that platform, we identified, or GIS identified the best 400, give or take, farms. And we put together a postcard and we mailed it to everyone. And I'm sorry to say that the response has been lackluster, other than this developer-owned property that I talked about yesterday, and another solar dual use question from a Warren County farmer with 125 acres. It has not resulted in applications coming in the door. I don't know if this is something you all in your own businesses have experienced, but the best way to talk about your program and to reach out to landowners is in person. And COVID and, you know, the shutting down of in-person indoor meetings really set us back as far as outreach and you know, meeting up with landowners. So hopefully we'll be able to get back into that mode. And we just keep peppering people with stuff. We're somewhat relentless. You know, we know where the best land is, and we have staff here in order to try to, you know, educate landowners to consider the program. Again, it's no cost and no obligation. I don't really understand why people don't see, you know, what the number would be. How can you make an educated decision if you don't know what the offer would be?
Can I follow up on a question about the exclusion, or you guys were talking about the exclusion area? It seems like a really important concept for land development. We're looking at an application to pursue an outdoor cultivation opportunity. And, you know, it's complicated by not being recognized by the federal government as agriculture. So we've understood that, you know, we're not going to get support from state agricultural entities. But the question related to the exclusion zone, it sort of sounds like that's a way that the SADC has handled allowing a farm property to continue its farm activity and be assessed as a farm, but take out the area of the land that's not considered approved by farmland preservation or farmland assessment. And is it true that that would be a case where that exclusion area wasn't subdivided, but was actually maintained as part of the farm, just taxed at a different rate?
Yep. So you've raised a lot of good points. So exception areas, exclusion areas come in two forms. One is a non-severable exception, right? I was saying we always advise landowners around their existing house and their ag buildings to take an exception area. Even if it's just 1 acre, right? It doesn't need to meet zoning. If you're in 3-acre zone or 6-acre zone, it doesn't matter because you can't subdivide it. It's called a non-severable exception. It always stays with the farm. It's just there to provide that future flexibility. You know, farmer, all of us never know when that adult child's coming home. And when your adult child is like a lawyer and wants to open a business, you know, and keep his business going, if it's not in an exception area, they can't do that. A kennel, a daycare, all those kinds of considerations can happen in an exception area. The other kind of exception area is a severable exception area that needs to meet zoning, including significant enough road frontage. And we do at the SADC have some leeway in making sure it's configured in such a way as to minimize the ag opportunity. You know, a lot of counties that have rolling hills, the best spot for that house is at the top of the middle of the best field to create, you know, a gorgeous view. Well, we're going to want to see it shifted somewhere adjacent to the side property boundary to include some of the wood, so it's just not taking out so much tillable ground. And we don't have a policy per se, but we do have the leeway to not approve an exception area. And senior staff use that at times when they feel the exception area is too large, right? Because then we don't really know what's going to happen there. And the premise of it, those uses can't negatively impact the ag operation, you know, is subjective, and nobody wants to go to court with landowners. So we just advise, you know, something that works both for the program and can work for the landowner. If the argument is I need 6 acres or more because I want it to be able to get farm assessed, then that's an easier understanding, you know, to create like another little farmette per se. I know the whole outdoor cultivation, I presume we're talking about cannabis, and I know that the SADC has approved one deed-restricted farm that a cannabis operator was interested in. But if I remember correctly at that meeting, the cannabis had to be grown indoors. And so why this property worked is there was a 2-acre exception area. So the building that they were going to build to grow was going to be on the exception area. I know Dave and I were talking about this yesterday. Any further update on that other than I've lost the Cannabis Regulatory Commission has a website at this point. So I just encourage you to go there and to understand more of the program rules.
Yeah, I don't think the Department of Agriculture regulates that. It's the Cannabis Regulatory Commission in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And back to what Cindy was talking about exception areas. If those exception areas are the area related to the preserve farm that's not encumbered by the preserve farm's deed restrictions. So just in terms of the deed restrictions, something could happen that otherwise on the preserve farm wouldn't be permitted. At the same time, any activities that are on the exception area would still need to, you know, comply with whatever local regulations or state regulations, federal, whatever exists. So just because something is allowed by the deed of easement on an exception area doesn't necessarily mean it would be allowed by a municipality or some other entity. So there might be other things that you'd have to look into.
May I ask a follow-up question? So Dave and Cindy, thank you so much. This has been so informative. My name is Smrita Chaubey. I'm a brand new farmer. I come from an agricultural family back in India, but born and raised here and never have owned my own farmland here until now. And I am buying a preserved farmland. And similar to what Mike was talking about, my intention is to pursue outdoor cultivation of cannabis. This is really linking back to a lot of the agricultural traditions dating back to India. And I'm in the process of navigating all of these rules, regulations. So the Cannabis Control Board has definitely allowed outdoor cultivation. So the state regulatory body for cannabis, there's a whole page in the regs allowing outdoor cultivation, and it specifically says that an outdoor expanse of land that is secured by an 8-foot fence is allowed. I'm in the process of going through my township approvals. Our township has said yes to greenhouse and indoor. We're working with them on kind of convincing them that outdoor cultivation is a better idea. And some of the key things that I've been bringing up is the environmental factor. So one of the worst kept secrets of the cannabis industry is that indoor cannabis is one of the worst offenders of greenhouse gas emissions out of any industry on planet Earth. Just imagine, they're building acres of indoor warehouses when sunshine is free, and instead they're powering it with light bulbs. And some of these players have electricity bills that are over $100K per month. So as an alternative, when you grow cannabis outside, there's some shocking information as to how much carbon the cannabis plant actually sequesters. So the math that I figured out is about 15 tons of carbon is sequestered out of the air and into the soil per 1 acre of cannabis. And that's both hemp and THC cannabis. So I really wanted to start engaging in more detail with the SADC and Department of Agriculture. I have a lobbyist who's already spoken to the Department of Agriculture. Directionally, they said they support outdoor cannabis. Obviously, we have to work through state and local municipal approvals as well, which we are doing. But I just wanted to philosophically just mention that, some of us are really lobbying hard in order to make outdoor cultivation happen in New Jersey. I was born and raised here in Jersey. I also spent 10 years in New York City. I'm also applying for the same license in New York. And I'm just a little bit shocked at how different the stories are in New York and New Jersey in terms of supporting farmers and getting into this industry. So New York this year said that they're going to give their first 200 cannabis cultivation licenses only to hemp farmers. So so a hemp farmer can grow it indoors if they choose to, but most hemp farmers obviously are growing outside. In Jersey, it's a little bit of a different story. There's not as many farmers who are even interested. We do see mostly this big canna, the indoor players. And, that has its place, and I'm not fighting that, but I strongly believe that we should be supporting the outdoor cultivators, just if even for the environmental perspective. So I think I just wanted to add that as a point related to some of the things Mike was bringing up. So if there's any advice you have for us as to how we can engage more with the SADC, it's great to hear that the SADC has approved one grow on a preserved farmland. My farmland, I have to go through Warren County for the preservation stuff, so I'll be chatting with them. But there seems to be a lot of hesitancy around this outdoor thing, but we're farmers and we know that a plant can be grown outside, but also the significant environmental benefits. So I think this is a huge opportunity for agriculture to really step up in New Jersey and say, hold on, before we go, 10 feet in the wrong direction, can we use this as an opportunity to support farmers, young farmers? And one of the main things that I think that this is a benefit of allowing outdoor cultivation is it allows entrepreneurial farmers the right to grow one cash crop, which we can then invest in a much broader biodynamic regenerative farming industry. So I just think it would be a huge help. And any advice you have as to how to navigate this, given that, we're already going through the Cannabis Control Board and municipalities, or any support on how we can work together and also use this as a research opportunity would be much appreciated. So more of a comment than a question, but thank you again.
Thanks for jumping in, Smrita. I know our guests, I think we've got a 1 hour meeting time. Is that right, Devin? I think we're probably should wrap it up. And unless there's any final comments from our guests, if you want to reply at all to that.
My name is Mary Ellen. I just have a quick question, and it's about writing your site-specific management plan. Is there any guidelines or references that we could use when writing this?
Talking about Right to Farm?
Yes, I have one of those lovely neighbors.
Yeah. It's, which county are you in?
Upstate County, we've been farming for 27 years. We have our farmland assessment. Like, how do you get your commercial designation? Um,
The process is you would give a call to the County Agriculture Development Board, and Cindy, is that Jennifer Summers?
It's
Yeah.
Jesse Summers, I believe.
Jesse Summers.
Okay,
And then discuss the process of requesting a site-specific ag management practice determination. You'll have to, I think there's probably a template form you could fill out requesting that determination from the board. You can make it as specific to specific parts of your operation, or maybe you just say your whole general operation, and then they'll probably visit the farm and ask for information to confirm eligibility criteria. And if those initial thresholds are met, have a public hearing, some notification requirements, and then they would pass a resolution.
I understand the process of how to go about the determination, but the plan that I have to write, how do I go about writing the plan?
There isn't really a plan, it's more of a request.
Okay,
You would describe what aspects of the farm or the entire farm operation that you're seeking the determination about. So you can make it general or broad, and they'll help kind of craft that.
So Dave, I think maybe if I'm getting what Mary Ellen, it's the CADB that would draft and write the site-specific agricultural management practice, not
Okay.
something that a neighbor or a landowner has to write. So
okay,
Dave's saying you got to request that from the CADB. They then have a public hearing at one of their meetings, and there's a lot of discussion. There's testimony from the farmer, from the neighbors, and then they start developing. If they grant the request for the site-specific AMP, they develop it.
oh, okay,
Yeah, on the website too, under the Right to Farm section, informal determinations, you can see examples of the resolutions that county ag development boards have passed in response to getting a request for site-specific AMP. And there was one other question I saw in the chat from Sandy, I think about
Tree farms.
tree farms. How does farmland preservation address tree farms and maybe tillable acres? Do you know that, Cindy?
Sure. So there's two types of tree farms. One is nursery operations, and they're totally eligible to apply. The other is, naturally grown forest lands. And currently, we have a minimum criteria for eligibility in our program that requires properties over 10 acres to have 50% tillable ground, or 25 acres, whichever is less. And if they're under 10 acres, it's 75% or 5 acres, whichever is less. With that said, and the desire to get more applications in the door, once soil protection centers have been put to rest, and we think the committee will be seeing the final version in April or May, and then it'll go to the register. Our chief of acquisition, pretty high on his hit list, is to write a woodlands program, so that a certain amount of our money would be available for farms that don't meet our minimum criteria, and potentially even 100% wooded farms. Back to Shmarita's comment about the environmental benefits, right? We hate having to tell landowners you need 2 more acres of tillable ground to be eligible, and then they cut down trees that they didn't really want to cut down. So look to the horizon if it's not a nursery operation, and hopefully within 3 years or so, we might have a woodland program. I wanted to just comment briefly, Shmarita, that was a very passionate plea about outdoor grow and the need to coordinate with the agencies. I took a lot of notes, and Dave and I report to other people, so we will make some comment. I'll get some email chatter going around that this is something that we heard from this NOFA monthly meeting, And hopefully, you know, everything develops with a team of people. So someone for NJDA, someone over here, and then, but really the ultimate decision making is the Cannabis Regulatory Authority. So we will try to follow up in-house and get the buzz going here.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I truly appreciate that. And that's all I ask. I just think it's such a big, massive mission that we just kind of want to start the conversation. And if it's helpful for us to do like an info 1 hour, just Zoom call or something, I think Mike and I would love to do that. We'd love to walk through some of the science that's already out there around carbon sequestration, the environmental benefit, medicinal benefits. But yeah, all we ask is some healthy dialogue. And I think that we could really do something revolutionary here to support agriculture in New Jersey.
You got it.
But all that being said, I do think it's time that we end the meeting. For those of us that have to hop on to other meetings. Dave, Cindy, thank you both so much for a really comprehensive presentation and for laying out all these resources for us. John, Mary Ellen, Sandy, Smrita, obviously reach out to us if you'd like more support, if you'd like to further this conversation or have separate conversations. We're eager to connect. A few of us will be occupied at 10, but feel free to reach out for later conversation today. Thank you all for attending. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.